Today on Locked On Canadiens, we revisit the coaching conversation and is Martin St. Louis actually the right coach for this team? Plus, we talk about what's going on in Ottawa, and spoiler alert, you're going to enjoy that.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 977. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Matlow of Habs Eyes on the Prize. Scott, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday evening that I apparently thought was a Sunday night?
Well, it's cold, it's snowy, it's icy. It's finally beginning to look a teeny bit like Christmas here in Western New York. And I have one day off before I'm off through the end of the year. So the motivation levels are like Habs penalty kill levels. They are very low at actually trying to do anything for the next 24 hours.
So, all right, speaking of end of year and beginning to look like Christmas, we will be off for the Monday and Tuesday episodes, and we'll be back next Wednesday. And we wish everyone happy holidays in the meantime, but we'll be here through the end of the week. So don't forget to send us your mailbag questions at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com, LO_Canadians, or you can leave them in the YouTube comments. But today, I didn't want to talk about that. What I wanted to talk about is Martin St. Louis. So on Saturday night, let me preface this actually before I get into Saturday night. So in recent weeks and months, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not Martin St. Louis is a good coach or not. And there's been a lot of schools of thought, and people think that, he's the wrong person for this team, or he's a bad coach, or the inexperience is just, it's too much to overcome, blah, 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 blah. So we've maintained on the show that he has a lot of questionable decisions that he makes in terms of lineup or in-game reactions or in-game adjustments, things like that. Like tactically and strategically, we think that he's lacking. And I've constantly maintained that it's just like it's a lot of inexperience at play. And so a lot of times he'll default to what he's witnessed as a coach, which is a lot of old school coaching. We do have a little bit of patience and a longer leash, but also in terms of mailbag questions or comments that we get, people are wondering if Martin St. Louis is in fact the right coach for this team. Or we had a very intriguing one that was brought up by one of our longtime listeners last week saying, is he just the coach for now and not necessarily the coach for the contending team? So I was on Game Over on Saturday night after that Islanders game, and I talked about it with our good friend Andrew Berkshire, and we talked a little bit, and I brought it to him. Is this what you feel? Is this what your listeners feel? Is this what your audience also feels? And what his thoughts were, and he didn't seem too concerned about Martin St. Louis, and in fact, his prediction was that, Martin St. Louis will stick around as the head coach, but what they'll do is they'll either add coaching staff or they'll replace assistant coaches. So in the second segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the next set of hires that the Canadiens are going to make, or they're going to have to make between now and contention. But I want to stick with Marty for a second, because it feels like from what Berkshire was talking about, and the more that I think about it, the more I think this is what he was getting at, is Martin St. Louis is not just like an inexperienced coach or anything like that. I mean, he is. We know that, and we've seen, and oftentimes where a different decision might have ended in a better result for the Habs. But Andrew referred to this as gentle parenting, right? And it seems like from that conversation, like I'm trying to look at it in a new way. It seems like Martin St. Louis is coaching one thing at a time, or he's adjusting one thing at a time, and he's like, okay, let's at first get back to basics and get these guys playing better hockey, right? And he's trying to do that in a very slow way. So all right, like they're back to like enjoying playing hockey, like what's the next thing we fix? And he is working on development, let's say, or things like that. So Scott, I want to put this question to you, because I do hope that you do have like a bit of a differing opinion, because I feel like there's a lot of stuff that still happens where it does feel like it's an old school mentality, like not giving younger players chances or overplaying veterans or throwing veterans back out in certain situations. So what are your thoughts? Like, do you think this is like a slow burn kind of thing, or do you just think that like he's just suffering from his own inexperience and just defaulting?
I think some of it is that there's a safety blanket for things. It used to be that safety blanket was Brendan Gallagher, Philip Deneau, and Thomas Tatar. That you could just go to that and we need something. Out you go. Or you need big minutes, Shea Weber and Ben Sherratt, out you go. The team is now less experienced, has bigger flaws in some ways, in that Martin St. Louis kind of defaults to that. And he is still trying to figure things out as he goes too. This is what his second full season behind the bench now, that he's not a perfect coach. We know he's a very good motivator. He's a guy who wants to, preach the systems. And I think he's doing about the best he can with the lineup that is currently injured. There's no Newhook, there's no Harvey Pinard, there's no Kirby Doc. That's three big pieces in your lineup that are now missing for the season or long term. And the thing for me to answer your first question is that, is he the guy to get there through the rebuild or to contention? I'm not 100% sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone comes along that they think can get them over that hump there. I think Martin St. Louis has done a very good job at getting through to this team and creating opportunities and systems for this team, because we've seen the Canadiens be very good this year. And then they sit on their leads, like I talked about in the last show, and it goes badly. But part of that is an inexperienced part where they're not really sure kind of what to do, and they're working their way through that. The biggest thing for me is that I'm wondering if, when that time comes, if there is a top tier coach or someone they think gets them into that next tier of contention, I wonder if Martin St. Louis goes and takes up a role in player development. It would be a promotion from coaching. It's a little less front-facing time, but he still gets to work with the players and work with the prospects and instill some of these things with Paul Byron and Francis Bouillon and Marie-Philippe Poulin, which is not in season for the PWHL or the Olympics or all the other amazing, crap that she does all the time. Sorry, crap is the wrong word, but everyone knows what I mean by this.
I was going to say, do I detect a hint of Team USA jealousy in there?
I mean, of course, I'm petty by nature. What can I say? I wonder if that is the next step here, because everyone seems to be on good terms here, and Martin St. Louis seems to be a great motivator, a really good guy to help instill some of those next steps for players there. With all these prospects coming in, who better to be a guy that can help them navigate through a lot of things than a guy who went undrafted, came in the league, fought, and scratched his way to a Hall of Fame career. I think I do agree with Andrew that I think he's going to be here for a little bit, and he is here to help them through the navigating of this. It's not like David Quinn or whatever Pascal Vincent is doing in Columbus right now, where it's like, you're a scratch, and you're a scratch, and you're a check, you're a scratch. Why? No one knows. Doesn't make any sense.
That did come up before we started recording, and we're still trying to figure it out.
So my thought is, I think he is the guy to be there for a little bit. Because if the team was unhappy, I don't think we would hear so much praise for. And usually when players talk, the boys in the room and this and that, they talk about Marty by name and what he does for this team. I think he is that guy that's going to be with them until he either decides he doesn't want to, or the wheels fall off disastrously across the board.
Here's my question real quick. I know, because we are running out of time in this segment, is that you were talking about, when that time comes, if there's another coach that the Habs think could get them over the edge and stuff, Martin St. Louis moves into player development. What if it's not his choice? What if they show up and they say, all right, we found this coach and we would like you to take whatever VP or assistant, whatever role? Does Martin St. Louis say yes to that?
It's hard to say, because also he is someone that I think is he's not overly prideful, but he does take a lot of pride in his work. I wouldn't be surprised to have that be a thing, though, just because he came from coaching under 13 hockey in Vermont to you're the head coach of one of the most valuable franchises in the sport now, out of nowhere. He's a guy who might want a little bit of a break in a behind-the-scenes role in that. He gets to work with Vinny behind the scenes in Montreal, in case everyone forgot that Vincent Lecavalier is part of the Canadiens front office. It's hard to say, but also at the same time, if he just wants to, go back to his quiet, private life, his son's playing college hockey and everything, I can't really argue with that, because it was unexpected they got here in the first place.
So, assuming he makes one of those moves, whether he leaves, he takes another position or whatever, the Canadians will have some shoes to fill. But did want to talk about, as they get closer to contending, what other hires do the Canadians need to make in the next few years? We're going to talk about that in just one moment here on Locked On Canadians. This episode is brought to you by Sleeper. So, this is a new NHL season, or we're almost all the way through it, and there could be so many things that could happen. I mean, who would have thought that the Ottawa Senators would be bottom feeders? And we're going to get to that in just a moment. But you know what? You could be winning, not losing like the Ottawa Senators by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And honestly, you could do anything. You could choose any players to win 100 times the money in a certain week. And you can also, play NFL, NBA, MLB, and college football all on Sleeper. And it's so easy to use, and the app is so easy, and you can connect with all kinds of fans just like you. And all you got to do is pick whether, somebody like a McDavid or a Crosby will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for anything like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. And to win 100 times on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, so let's talk about hires for the Canadiens, because again, just like my conversation with Andrew kind of made me revisit my position on Marty and maybe think about it a little bit more. I'm also thinking, because Andrew suggested that the Canadiens might want to, replace the Burrows and oh my God, Robida Island,
Yeah, and
Burrows and
Trevor
Robida
and
Letowski.
Trevor Letowski. So
Yes. With more experienced or more established assistant coaches, maybe guys who had been coaches in the past, and things like that. But what I really wanted to think about is what kind of non-coaching personnel do the Canadians need to change between here and, let's say, 2 to 3 years from now when they start getting good? Because I remember when the Leafs just started showing promise, they started hiring skating coaches that were, former figure skaters, not necessarily hockey skaters. They started hiring people like that to kind of show up and help them with their development. I also think that, in terms of the Habs, I feel like their scouting staff is very large, but I still can't figure out what they're about. So I feel like at some point there needs to be some sort of cohesive unit to that aspect too. Scott, what are your thoughts real quick?
well, my first thought is that I agree that there needs to be some changes on the NHL bench. My biggest fear, and one that I've had for a little bit here, especially now that the Senators fired their head coach, which more on that, is Benoit Gros is someone that I think has been long overdue for an NHL role. He's working behind the scenes with the Lightning right now, and from talking to Tampa Bay people, that if an NHL job comes along, they're not going to stand in his way. They will let him take that, no questions asked. He's someone who's gotten a lot out of Syracuse crunch teams in the past, has led them to a lot of playoff berths, a lot of really competitive seasons, and is a big part of all those prospects that worked their way into Tampa system pretty flawlessly over the years. John Cooper, obviously, before that, they kept that tradition kind of going. He's someone I would like to see on the Canadiens bench because he does have a lot of coaching experience, whereas Letowski, Robida, and Burrows, and even Martin St. Louis lack a little bit of that. I think he'd be a nice add on the bench there. The biggest thing I think they need to do is investing in stuff like Adam Nicholas and everything. Great. Love that. Absolutely perfect. Continue to expand on things like that, and then continue to modernize your scouting and drafting department. Chris Boucher, great ad. Build on that. Continue to expand on that. That's all I can really ask for, is continue to modernize and adapt. Don't let yourself get 2 steps behind and then try to play catch up to it. We've seen it doesn't often go well for teams. Try and be ahead of the curve as much as you can in that regard.
I think one of the things for me, and I have to admit, I don't know exactly how they would do this, is kind of creating and exploiting new market inefficiencies. And what I mean by that is that, every team has their scouting department, they have their analytics people, they have, teams that they work with, sorry, companies that they work with for data and things like that. But there, I feel like internal, like, data gathering is a thing that the Canadians or any team can do. Like, if you come up with a new way to do it, or you come up with information that you weren't necessarily tracking before, that you slowly find like does have an effect on your on ice outcomes, it's essentially just creating new stats for yourself. But hiring people like that who have this outside the box thinking. And a lot of times, like, people don't understand, like, when we talk about analytics, it's nothing that's made up. It's all using actual data, right? Like, it predicts outcomes, there's percentages and things like that, but it's all based on what's actually happening in the game. And there's so many moments, and there's so many just puck touches. Like just think about it. Like, in most industries, when you're like working at a desk, things are measured in keystrokes, right? Puck touches, like, just things like that, where, like, you've got like these smart people who just have like, and you have to have the willingness to spend a little money on that front, because it could be things that they decide, okay, I'm going to track this and I'm going to see what effect it has on the game. And then it might not have any effect on the game, and you change the data, but you have to be able to constantly be dynamic about the information you're gathering about your own team, and then see if you can kind of like have your scouting department look out for it on other teams and things like that. So again, it's not inventing, it is taking what's already happening and looking at it in a new perspective. So I love data. I love the idea of data, and I find that data helps to inform decisions. Sometimes, like, you could get too married to it, and that's totally fair. And sometimes you can just reject it altogether and just go on a hunch and your gut. And I think that you have to be able to marry the two effectively. Like, I don't think that it's ever one or the other. Like, people are just like, who cares about the numbers? Just go with your gut and you're always right. A lot of times your gut is based on what's actually happening on the ice, right? The numbers just say that in a different way. So I feel like investing in that is a big thing. And I want them to invest in a power play coach. Just like anybody around the world, anywhere that is good at power play coaching, just give them that. Just that.
I think that's something, special teams in general. The penalty kill hasn't been good, and the power play has been stagnant. To tie this into football, everyone knows that I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, where they consistently have a very good offense and defenses that rank in the bottom, and they continue to pick the worst options for that and stick with them for too long and cost themselves wins in season and playoff games, etc. Do not anchor yourself to things here. You're the Canadians, you can afford it. Find a specialist to help coach the PK, and he can sit up in the press box during games and kind of oversee things and what he is seeing down to the bench, because everybody has an earpiece they can talk into these things here. You have the money, spend it. They tried to do it with a goaltending department that we never really got any further information on, but hire a power play specialist, hire a penalty kill specialist. They don't have to be on the bench in game. Hire the specialist to get your team to that next level. You have a lot of guys who are going to be coming into these situations. You have no excuses to not put them in the best possible position to succeed at this point. I know I talked about Benoit Gru. I'd have to look and see who's coached some of the best PKs around the league in recent years. Lure people away. Hire someone to help in the defensive zone. The goaltending is clearly on the way up here. Samuel Montembeault has been very good. Caden Primo's having a pretty solid year overall too. Build your specialists in here and help. We talked about what does Martin St. Louis need, to get to the next level. So he's going to be the coach. If they can keep a league average power play and a league average penalty kill, this team might look entirely different. They're already in a pretty good spot. They're 2 points out of a wild card spot right now. If they had a functional power play and a functional penalty kill with specialists coaching that, spend a day in practice, 2 days in practice, just doing those things. Let Martin St. Louis and them do their 5-on-5 stuff. Great. Find somebody you can focus on this, hone in on it, hone it to an edge, make it lethal. Teams who want to take penalties against you for whatever reason, make them pay for it. Make them not take penalties against you. Be that team. And that comes with hiring specialists, finding new coaches. And I get that Alex Burrows hasn't really done anything offensively bad. I know the power play isn't bad, but he's not the coach there. I don't fully know what the roles are on this team, but you can't stick with things for too long if they're anchoring your team. Find the time to move on and make the most of it.
That's exactly it. Also, I feel like one of the things is that the defense needs to be better, obviously. So a lot of the penalty kill, like we'll see once they have their defensive coaching and strategy, and those players are fitting well together. We'll see how bad the power play is. The penalty kill is then, and then you'll know like specifically what is lacking. Like, is it creativity? Is it not enough mobility? Is it blah blah blah? Is it blah blah blah? So I feel like that's an option. Like once you have the right personnel, you'll be able to make that decision a lot quicker and easier. In the meantime, we don't have to make any decisions about the Sens because they're doing it for themselves. And honestly, like even with the new owner, that era is not starting off super great so far. And we're going to talk about that in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The weather's getting colder and the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. And that's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time than now to get in on the action because the app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And, the holidays are a great time for watching football. I know because I forget NFL exists up until the holidays start, and then we're in the home stretch of the season, and then I get invested in how it's going. So right now is really the best time. All you have to do is visit fanduel.com/lockedon, and you can kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL and us. All right, Scott, do you want to do the honors about talking about the Sens? Because this kind of, we found out it was happening yesterday, or was it the day before? Didn't really talk about it all that much, but it does bear discussing. Like, why was DJ Smith there for so long? Why is how far are they in there? They were supposed to stop rebuilding like 5 years ago. How's it going with Michael Andlauer as the new owner? I still think he's sabotaging them from the inside as a Habs fan, as a secret Habs fan from Toronto, or the Toronto area, I should say. Scott, where do we start?
So the biggest thing with this is the Ottawa Senators have a couple of things going against them, which the first one being one of their main players, Shane Pinto, has been suspended for half the season because of betting on sports. Meanwhile, today the NHL announced a new betting partnership, which a whole thing that I won't speak further on. So I get why they might be upset about that. The biggest thing with this is there's that whole lawsuit over the Evgeny Dodonov thing, which either someone was not credibly informed or did not read close enough, which is a mess. Basically, the previous regime left Michael Andlauer and Steve Staios a disaster of a team here, thanks to Pierre Dorian and before that Pierre Maguire. But don't worry, Pierre Dorian, the summer of Dorian, right, friends? Definitely was a good thing that happened and not at all hilarious at how mediocre they are. They finally fired DJ Smith, probably a year too late, because DJ Smith was famously fired from Toronto, where I can't remember who he was replaced with on that Sheldon Keefe staff there. And he just was not very good, got hired by the Senators, hasn't made the playoffs. The team has gotten zero defense, zero goaltending. They finally fired him, and Jacques Martin was the interim specialist they brought in about 3 days before this happened. And every single person in the world could see this coming, that they brought in one of their former coaches, a guy who's been on a lot of staffs, including I believe Jacques Martin was on one of those Penguins staffs that won those back-to-back Stanley Cups there. Mm-hmm. That when Jacques Martin joins a staff, just assume that you're likely being fired soon. The absolute insane part of this is they let him run a 2-hour practice where they were supposed to be loosing, having fun, and then fired him afterwards.
What?
Yeah, even Ian Boisvert put it best. Even
I
when
missed
they do
that part.
even when they do the right thing, they still sensed it up by firing him after the practice and not beforehand. The biggest thing is Ottawa is 10 points behind the Canadiens in the standings. One of these teams was supposed to be competing for a playoff spot this season. One of them is still in the midst of a rebuild. And things can change very quickly. Ottawa's played 5 less games than the Habs for some reason that I don't understand. But they're not in a great spot right now. And just to be very clear here, Buffalo is currently losing 7-1 to Columbus. They are also behind the Canadiens this year, and we're supposed to be a potential playoff team. They are 3 points behind the Habs with a game in hand. It's the
not
Atlantic
pretty out
divisions.
there.
Yeah, it's wild in that my fear is that the Senators are going to hire a smart coach who can play some form of defense. And you're going to watch the Senators kind of watch their stock rise. They're going to get the new coach dead cap bounce potentially. We kind of saw it with Edmonton. I don't think Knobloch is the reason for that. I think Connor McDavid is healthy, and they finally got a goalie who could stop a beach ball. But it's bad. Like, Ottawa should not be in this position. And I'd say it pains me to say this, but it doesn't, because
It
I
really
hate
doesn't.
them. So, but for a team whose the rebuild is over 3 years ago, you are still now worse off than the Habs. All of your prospects are in the NHL right now, basically. Like, it is just, it's a mess. Just stop it across the board, honestly.
And I do want to. I wanted to touch back on that thing where, like, was it Chikrin that was going into the Dallas Stars locker room? Did we ever get into the bottom of that? Did you?
Apparently he had a cut on his face that they told him to go in and get looked at. So,
Oh, okay. Because, like, it was such a funny meme on the internet for a couple of days, and I was like, wait, was he really, like, was he making a point that he wasn't happy in Ottawa and just trying to be, like, snarky about it? I didn't think that was for real. But at the same
yeah.
time, this, like, it does kind of sort of give us pause as fans of a rebuilding team. Like, there are successful rebuilds. There is the Colorado route. There's obviously the blatant tanking that worked for the Penguins, and they're still, constantly, not this year, but they're constantly like a threat to be in the conversation, right? There's the LA route, which is, kind of I don't but they did the right thing. They drafted high, blah blah blah. And then there's the Buffalo or Ottawa route. But I will say this, Scott, and I don't know if you will agree with me on this, is that as a team, these are division rivals that I hate when the Habs play against them, division rivals that there's a lot of bad history with. But I find that the Buffalo Sabres are way more fun than the Ottawa Senators.
They are, because they're the chaotic. The thing about the Senators is they could have a game where they score 5 goals or they could give up 5 goals. The Sabres are more fun because we don't hate them as much, because the Senators hiring a retread coach from the late 90s, early 2000s who speaks French to try and get the team back on track is such a Habs move that I would start accusing them of trying to be the Montreal Canadiens. Like,
Please, no.
I mean, if they want to be really mediocre for a long time and get lucky with an all-world goalie, then great. Go ahead and try and do that. Press your luck on trying to draft a goalie who can be Carey Price. It's just a team that should be better than this. And if I were a fan of the team, and thank God I'm not, I'd be furious. A lot of people have been calling for DJ Smith to be let go. And then he got a vote of confidence. Pierre Dorian got fired, like a month into the season, if that. And they're a team that is in transition right now between ownership and everything else. And they're on the precipice of something potentially happening here, because I believe I haven't looked at I want to look at Cap Friendly real quick, just because I want to take a look at what their cap situation's not bad, but let's see. Vladimir Tarasenko's a UFA after this year. Dominic Kubelik's a UFA. Claude Giroux has one more year after this. They're a team that should be contending right now, or was supposed to be contending right now, and they're not. And that comes down to bad coaching and ownership not having the gumption to actually make that move. We saw it with the Canadiens with Michel Therrien for a long time. Eventually, you got to make the move. If your team is underperforming that long with that much dedicated to it, it's a coaching problem. And I hope it continues. I hope they hire the worst possible option out there, to be quite honest. The rumors are, do they want Patrick Waugh, which the last thing is that division needs is Patrick Waugh in it. I want them to pick the worst possible option here. I want the humor in my life of that right now. Like, honestly and truly, that is what I need.
And we are going to continue watching them. But before I let everybody go, Scott thought that he escaped it, but no, happy birthday, Scott. Everybody wish Scott a happy birthday because on the day that you're listening to this episode, it will be his birthday. Scott, how old are you now? 25?
I am 25 plus 8 when this episode comes out. So
And so if you want to wish my co-host well wishes, you can find him on Twitter at Scott Matla. You can find our show on Twitter at LO_Canadians. You can also find this show free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.